You are now listening to Femme Regard Podcast with Tessa Markle
and Carolina Alvarez.
Femme.
Hi, Femme Fam. Welcome back to another amazing episode from FemmeRegard Podcast. We're your hosts, if you haven't heard, Carolina
and
Tessa in the house. We are already off to a great start this season, and we have been continuously getting amazing, incredible guests from Michael Weesey Productions, who are leading industry experts as directors or cinematographers. And we got another one today. Her name is Jacqueline Frost. She is a cinematographer. She has worked in the industry for over 30 years. She's been a college professor at California State Fullerton, and now she is at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Shout out Jersey. But she wrote this book, Cinematography for Directors, a guide for creative collaboration. It is the essential handbook for directors and aspiring filmmakers, shout out Femme Fam, yes, who want to get the best visuals for their films while establishing a collaborative relationship with their cinematographer, which is key, as we know. And it is the only book that focuses exclusively on the relationship between the director and the cinematographer. And so you'll get to hear more about how that relationship works and her experience in the industry in this interview. But what we can already see that we love is that there's actually like a handbook in that book of like how to go through things.
Yeah. And it's really, really helpful for people that, don't know much about like camera stuff, and how to frame things and why you frame things a certain way and all of that stuff. Like it really just lays it out in layman's terms, super simple, explains things so that anybody can understand.
Yeah, so as always, we're going to do a book giveaway with this one, and we are so excited to share. So we really hope you guys enjoy.
And here's Jacqueline.
To start off, we just want to highlight you a little bit in your background for our listeners and get a sense of who you are.
Who I am? Well, as a young undergrad, let's say, I started studying. I was a fine arts major. Mm-hmm. And I bolted from New Jersey and I hit Florida. So I was a fine arts major in Florida. And I wound up at the University of Florida in Gainesville, where I studied photography and a lot of art history, along with studio classes. I had no idea that ultimately this is prepping me for what has become something that I've utilized for the rest of my career. The knowledge of art, the knowledge of painting, of the knowledge of color and all of that. So then on top of that, my senior year, I took a film history class and I fell in love with it. I always loved movies, I used to come home from school and watch the 4:30 movie and, ask my mom, who's this one? Who's that one? I was always into movies. So I was sort of self-educating. And then I took that class and it just, it made it all come together. And I realized that I wanted to do film, study film, learn more. So I bounced around a little bit. I started off at NYU, but then I ended up in San Francisco.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a really great time to be in San Francisco studying film. I was at San Francisco State in the early 80s and 83 to 87-ish, so at that time and place, the place was brand new to me. So my senses were really attuned to the vibe of the place. Yeah. And that's where I really became interested in shooting. Because I shot something for my own projects and, that looked good. Will you shoot mine? And then it was, will you shoot mine? Will you shoot mine? So I wound up shooting a lot of people's short films, experimental films, documentaries, and I'm talking on film, celluloid. Mm-hmm. So all over the city, all over the East, just shooting, 16 millimeter film with a Arri BL 16 or a CP 16 or whatever we had access to. A Clarion VR camera I don't really like. But a lot of 16, a lot of shooting. And then from there, it was sort of also the culmination of studies and practice, like doing production, but also learning a lot. I studied with Trinh Minh Ha, who's a documentary ethnographic filmmaker who's a genius. I took cinematography with Babette Mangolt, who shot for Yvonne Rainer and did a lot of experimental films. And she inspired me with a film she did called The Sky on Location, which was all the desert. And it really didn't have any actors. It was just really about light and the tone and the mood of the desert. So she inspired my thesis film to be something that I did, which was about the sea and me. So it was kind of the East Coast, West Coast comparison thing, and realizing the West Coast, the Pacific, the edges, the rough seas and all of that as a metaphor of the uncertain future. And I used home movies from our family archive of East Coast vacation.
Oh my God.
Past. So that's the
girl, that LVI trip every summer. I hear you.
Well, you guys, I have to tell you this. I'm sorry. I was a lifeguard in Ship Bottom on the beach.
Oh my God. Ship Bottom was the other spot we literally went to every summer. I'm dead.
I may have rescued you. You never know.
Okay, yeah, so that though makes so much sense to me, having been raised in Jersey too, and like understanding it's so different, and that nostalgic, home feel of that beach, versus what I feel out here is different, completely
San Francisco
different.
With the fog and the cliffs,
the cliffs, insane.
So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, and I love that. So this was your thesis.
That was one of my thesis films.
Okay.
So then, I kind of I was shooting for people, but then I really did like teaching. And so I went to Florida again, and I was trying to freelance, but it wasn't really happening there at that time. So I took a teaching job in Oklahoma, and I made some films there because Oklahoma was such a weird ass place for me.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very random location to go to next.
She then went...
I was like a fish out of water, flopping in the, it was just so.
No, I love this. This is amazing. Okay, so you're in Oklahoma now.
So I was there for more than I wanted to be, which was 4 years, but I was doing film there and I was teaching film there. And it was really kind of interesting to, be teaching like these Okie kids film production, And after that, I went back to Miami and I got another degree in film, but I really focused on the business aspects of it. And then a colleague of mine, we decided to make an independent feature film. So then we started fundraising, and I DP'd the film and co-produced with her. And that kind of went on the independent track, and I was shooting for a while. And then, it was hard in Miami because I didn't really speak Spanish well enough to get by. And it was becoming more and more independent stuff, Spanish speaking productions and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I took a job in California because it was close to LA, and went out there, and I really had a great experience, not only teaching, but getting in with people at the ASC, getting in with UCLA in ways I never thought I'd be able to. So I started teaching at the UCLA Extension, a course called Cinematography for Directors. Yeah. It was a weekend workshop. I had students like Christine Lottie. I had Bryce Dallas Howard. These were students in the class, and
wow,
cool. And a lot
so cool. You're teaching them, you're giving them the tools. That's amazing.
And inspiring actors, and actresses, like people who want to know more about the technical aspects, but it seemed overwhelming and intense to them. And I seemed to be able to speak both languages, to be able to bridge the connection between the technical and the aesthetic, and also make it understandable. To people who were like, what is depth of field, f-stops, characteristic curve, I don't want to hear these things, and you
already lost us. Absolutely. That's no, I'm so excited to like kind of get into that language aspect, because it can be really daunting for a new director to like go into that space where, okay, now I get to have a DP or like like an actual cinematographer work with me. How do we make my vision come to life? And I think a lot of listeners on our show are like actors first, who are stepping into producing and directing, and it's a whole nother animal.
And it shouldn't be an intimidating thing, because once you understand what a DP really wants, it's not hard to ask for that. So what got me on this, then that tangent, I decided to write the book, the first edition of Cinematography for Directors, that came out in 2009. And I thought, well, let me I was teaching cinematography, and I was bringing students to the ASC clubhouse, for like field trip where they could meet and have a dialogue with working cinematographers. I would go to Cine Gear Expo, and I would go to all the workshops, and I got to know ASC members. So then I started to interview people at first who just would be interested in talking to me. I was like, will you talk to me about,
Yeah.
Nancy Schreiber, of course, who now we're really good friends. She was one of the early people that we started a dialogue. And then I started thinking, well, I want to contact DPs that I'm admiring of their work. I'm a fan of their work.
Right.
So let me just reach out and see who responds. So I wrote letters to John Seal, Dante Spinotti, Seamus McGarvey, Roger Deakins, all these people.
Yeah.
And they started to respond. They said, sure, I'd love to speak with you. And I was like, holy moly. So sitting down and having a dialogue with these ASC top-notch A-list cinematographers, and I was able to actually understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
And ask them intelligent questions. And I would have like anywhere from 1.5 to sometimes a 3-hour conversation. It was like a masterclass in cinematography. It was fantastic. So I transcribed them, the first interviews myself, and then I had them transcribed. But going through that, you learn so much too.
Yeah.
So I had all these interviews, and then I kind of like stalled out for a little while, and I was, doing other things. And then I came back to it, and I did another book, which is an interview book on top of Cinematography for Directors, second edition.
Okay.
Because in between the first and the second, the whole technology of shooting image capture changed.
Yeah.
So book comes out, and then so does Alexa. And I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
Because nobody read that much, but everybody loved Alexa. So I had focused on, film completion more than digital. So I decided, I let some time go by, and the book was going along, and I did more. And I kept collecting interviews, kept collecting.
Smart.
And then I started to focus more on the changes from film to digital technology, and then it made a complete radical shift. So now I did keep film completion, but I pushed it back, and I put digital in the forefront because the language changed, the whole technology and the way of working changed. And now young DPs shooting are like, ooh, film.
Yeah.
Like some weird ancient thing that is all I really knew.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's like music, when everybody was like, it was vinyl, and then it was tapes, and then it was CDs, and now it's vinyl again. And, so yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, well, I understand, because basically what they did is they took all the concepts of film reel and how, not only just nonlinear editing systems, but also image capture, understanding depth of field and all, and they put it into a digital camera. So in a sense, in these digital cameras, you have every film stock you want. You have filtration. You have the opportunity to really open up and shoot in low light situations. Yeah. So it did get better, and the image quality is amazing, but there's still something special about film, and there always will be. To me, I love shooting Super 16 with, you just slap that magazine. It's just something that's very primal.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure all of our DP listeners right now are nodding, and they're like, yes, yes, we love it.
I mean, even us, from non-camera operating side, just seeing something on film is there's something special about it, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how it sort of transforms, because you're looking at digital assist, and it's not really a waveform. It's not a monitor that's going to really show you what it's just to show you approximately that what your framing is, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get it back from the lab, and when you screen dailies on, it was fantastic. It was like such a rewarding experience, and also relaxing to see everything looked really good. But just the way film would read color and light was different than the way your thing is digital. There was that magical transference that made people look really good. And, it had a beautiful, if you lit it a little warmer, a little softer, you could take years off somebody's face.
Yeah.
Whereas with the way digital is so crisp and hard right now, it's like, you want to filter it down. It's a little crisp, a little too sharp.
Which
really
like,
do all that?
That blows my mind. And maybe it's just because I'm not like a super tech person, but I'm like, why are we developing this technology to make stuff so high definition that our eyeballs can't even like comprehend it? And on top of that, it makes people look awful because you see every wrinkle or mistake in their makeup or blemish or anything. Like, it's kind of the opposite of what we want. And then, like you said, we end up like scaling it down. And it's just like, what? Why are we doing this?
A lot of it is because of digital effects. It's like the more sophisticated digital effects got, the easier it was to just keep everything in the digital realm.
Yeah.
And you know who was really a proponent, who really kickstarted a lot of this, was George Lucas. You know, he really was.
Makes sense.
That forward, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And one of his buddies, Steven Spielberg, is one of the ones who held out the longest not going to digital. You know, and he kept editing even on film as long as he possibly could. You know, and then it finally said, we need to join the digital revolution now and like, you know, shoot what everybody else is shooting. But you know, it still has a nostalgic kind of, shooting on film. You know, I know there's a lot of people who still really love it, and I know there's a lot of DPs who want to have the opportunity to shoot it.
Yeah, we have a ton of DP friends who do, and like are going back to it and doing like little side projects. Like I feel like a lot of DPs love it still, and like it's at the heart of what they enjoy to do.
And the learning curve is like now. If you know digital, and then all of a sudden now you have to get a light meter, you know, for your exposure. You have to load the film properly. You have to make sure that the gate is clean. And then you have to, I mean, there's things that you have to do. You don't have to do digitally, you know, and then you have to get the film processed, and then the color timing lights, and make sure your exposure is where it should be, and picking the right stock, and all of those things that became just second nature to DPs that were trained in that. You know, and when I talk about having every choice, like, you know, Kodak makes different film stocks. And the ironic thing about right at the height of the digital coming in and kind of taking over in 2009, 2008, that they came out with the whole Vision 3 stocks, which were the most beautiful film stocks they had ever made. You know, the resolution was beautiful. Their color rendition was beautiful. The, you know, the speed, you know, was 500T tungsten film was the fastest that they have. So when you think about shooting tungsten film at night, 500T, the speed of the film, it is basically could be pushed, but you could take a digital camera out and you could set your ISO at easy 850, 1600 and beyond, and still get a really quality image, which you couldn't do with film. So I remember when I interviewed Polly Morgan. And she was talking about shooting A Quiet Place 2 on film after mostly shooting digitally. And she was terrified of the night shoots using, you know, a 500 ISO stock, because, you know, like, oh my God, am I going to get an exposure? Is this going to look okay? Is it going to be muddy? Is it going to be grainy? You know, it's those things that you have to think about, where, you know, with digital, you don't really have to think that much about it.
Yeah. I think that's something because too. I was just going to say really quick. I think that's something too that people that don't shoot or even don't shoot like still photography, people that just aren't used to like what things look like through a lens, don't realize that, you know, whether we're talking film or digital, is that everything is different through a lens, you know, and something that the naked eye sees in a certain kind of light is going to look completely different on the screen, you know, and especially of course after editing and color correction, all that stuff. But like, it's just something to consider, I think, for like, especially filmmakers that are like brand new and, you know, they don't know that difference. Like, it is such a difference. And it's just something to really be aware of. If you are someone that, you know, is new to directing and maybe you don't know the camera stuff, like be aware of that kind of stuff, because it can really make or break a film, you know, and make things look completely different. Yeah.
And, you know, the thing with DPs too, is they don't, you know, they don't want a director to come in and tell them format to shoot on, you know?
Yeah.
They want to make that suggestion based on the material, the script, you know? They don't want to say, oh, hey, I have this red, you have to use it. It's going to turn off a DP, you know? You want to be careful too with, like, you know, what you expect from your DP, how you treat your DP, the collaborative process. You know, it's interesting now. I mean, I'll kind of jump back to it, but I'm currently teaching a course I never taught before, nor did I ever take before, but I'm having a great time with. It's called the History of Cinematography. So the history really is that, back in the early development of cinema, they were cameramen. They were just camera operators. They were technicians, and they saw themselves as technicians. As we developed through the history of film and cinema, that changed to being artists and collaborators, So an experienced DP will happily work with a writer director who's fairly new to the craft, because they know the material, but they want to share their input. And I think that DPs are some of the most giving and sharing that you'll ever meet in the industry, with each other, as well as the people they work with. I recently watched the ASC Awards banquet streaming. You should check it out. It's on the ASC website.
Okay.
And for our listeners, I just want to point out that is the American Society of Cinematographers,
which is a wonderful organization.
Yeah. Well, so it's right there on their website.
Yes, right there on the website, and
we'll have to check it out.
It's streaming, and yes, it's the first time that a woman DP won the Lifetime Achievement Award, and that was Ellen Couras, who's worked with Scorsese, and Scorsese gives a nice message for her. And Rachel Morrison, the first woman to be nominated for an Academy Award, presented. It was awesome.
I love that.
It was really great. And I've interviewed both of them for my other book, which is called Conversations with Contemporary Cinematographers, The Eye Behind the Lens. Routledge published that one. And what I did during COVID is that I just, again, the same way I'm going to reach out to people that I'm interested in and see if they'll talk to me. Well, because of COVID, they were home with nothing to do. So they did talk to me. Everybody talked to me.
That's like us with the podcast, same thing.
Everybody talked to me. And I was just like, this is great. So I wound up doing this book that has more women DPs interviewed than men. I was going for a 50-50, but I think there's one extra woman on there. So
okay.
So
that's awesome.
It's tough too. Like, I mean, this goes across the board in the industry pretty much, but especially with a lot of like gear centered jobs, is that like there's so many female DPs out there, but we don't really get to hear about them a lot because they aren't getting the same kind of opportunities, So something like this is great, like your book that has at least one more woman in it, that it's like to show like, hey, we're out. Well, they're out here. I shouldn't say we, because I definitely don't know anything about cameras.
They're part of the conversation.
They're out here and, they're getting it done and they're amazing. And we just need to be a little better about finding them, And
there are more and more because of really the doors are being flung open for young female cinematographers now. I wish I was 23. I wish I was starting now.
Yeah,
I would have gone a completely different direction. It was harder. I mean, I'm there on the age group with Ellen Couras and Amy Vincent. And, it wasn't easy, when you would stand there on set behind the camera. I remember somebody come up to me and asked if I was the talent. I was literally standing behind the camera. Yeah. Why would I be the talent standing behind? I looked at them like, are you nuts? With a typical Jersey face, What, yes, nuts? You fucking crazy?
Like, do I look like no?
No.
I'm not.
I'm wearing butt clothes. I'm behind the camera. I am obviously shooting.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. Now it still happens today. So yeah. Unfortunately, we've had some guests be candid with us on the show before, but I do think there are more opportunities open, like you're saying, and that's really exciting. It
is. And with all the women that I spoke with, of this kind of the younger, newer generation that are coming up, they're in their early 40s. I asked them to tell me about the experiences they've had. And some of them had some experience that were like pretty intense.
Yeah.
The way they were treated on set, the way things that they had to fight through still, and moved on past it. They all had a story.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, I feel for them, and it's just sad. It's just sad to hear that.
Yeah.
But I have been teaching as many women as I can. I encourage. My cinematography class did go from like having maybe out of 20, 25, maybe 2 women to then there were maybe 5, and then it started to be equal. and I started to say that this is good. Don't be afraid of the technology.
I love that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I just want to go back to another thing that I want to clarify between cinematographer and DP, because I think from my understanding, they are different, but they can at sometimes be the same person, right?
The same person.
They are literally the same person. It's an interchangeable word.
Yes. Director of photography, DP, which people like to say because it's shorter than cinematographer.
Right.
Unless you're Vittorio Storaro, and he would much prefer to be called a cinematographer than a DP. But he is a DP. It's director of photography. So in essence, you are directing the whole camera crew. So there are DPs who they work maybe multi-camera. So they have multi-camera operators. They work with a gaffer. They work with grip. Right. They work with best boys. They work with, a whole crew. So they're managing that crew as well as being the liaison to the director with really coming up with a visual exposition of the script itself, and translating the director's vision technically onto the screen. So,
right. No, I'm glad you made that clarification and distinction, because on these more independent film sets, sometimes you don't have, I guess where my brain gets like confused is that sometimes the DP isn't the one actually physically shooting. They're watching because they're directing, like you said, literally all these other moving parts, but on a smaller set, maybe there isn't that extra camera. Cinematographer is who I would like envision that being, but it's really the same person, and you would have like an AC or, whoever's pulling focus. Right.
So for smaller productions, I would get the title cinematographer.
Okay.
If I'm operating and I'm doing a lot of things, if I'm my own gaffer, in a sense, or I'm doing a lot of things, then I am just basically the cinematographer. Like I do documentaries still now, and I'm just cinematographer. Mm-hmm. I feel like director of photography is, you think about a bigger camera crew.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that makes a lot of sense, and why someone would choose to use a certain title, and depending on the set and the size of the project. Yeah. And something that I want to point out too that you said earlier on that I think gave me some peace in moving forward with like, speaking to different DPs and not getting so nervous about the language is, like you said, they want to help, and they know that you might not know all these technical things.
They know that you don't.
They know that you don't. And so when you sit down and you're like, hey, this is my vision, I've feel like then that job of knowing what lens and, aperture and the light, like where it needs to be, that's on them. Like, I feel like I can do as much research as I want, but that is their role. And so I should not get so tied up in all of that, if that makes sense.
No, I think in terms of what a DP or a cinematographer expects from a director is that you have an understanding. The first conversation would be just the script, right? What right. is the thematic elements of the script? Because the thematic elements of the script are really what defines the color palette, the lighting, the look, right? If it's comedy, it's going to look one way. If it's a drama, another, a horror, another, sci-fi, another. It depends, right? So you want to find the overall theme of the script itself, right? And from that, you start to have a conversation. Well, okay, how do you see it? What does it look like to you? In terms of color palette, is it a natural color palette? Is it a cool color palette? Is it warm? Is it a memory mixed with present? That's going to be two different color palettes intertwined. Yeah. And then basically coming up with references, visual references. So today you can do a director's kind of lookbook. You could do a shot deck and come up with, I like this, I like this, I like this. And the DP will look at that and go, yeah, I get that. And I like this and this. What do you think of that? Yeah. And you share that vision with creative elements. That there's nothing that tells a story better than images. to visual.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have such great resources today to pull from, so that it shouldn't feel like a scary thing. It should be exciting and creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is what I love. I love that part of like finding all the color palettes and connecting it to the emotional story and like, yeah, like you said, what's reality? Maybe it's a dream. That's going to change. So it's, for me, it's like the really fun part. And like now even observing more like, you know, transitions and all of that, because I never had to hyper focus so much before till like now, you know, and like really be like, okay, they're kind of doing this interesting zoom lens thing, you know, or it's like I can describe it. I might not know the proper like technical like, you know, learning what a diopter is or like, you know, like all those things. It can feel like a lot, but it gets exciting
where you focus. That's
yeah.
I mean, so that it's in focus when you shoot on film. But you know, understanding a little bit about like focal length. That is something I would teach in the cinematographer, because I think lens power, you can empower yourself by understanding lenses, right? What does a wide angle lens give you versus a normal lens versus a telephoto lens, a prime versus a zoom? Okay, there's things you can do on a zoom you can't do on a prime, right?
Right.
Like zoom in, zoom out, dolly back, zoom in, that whole kind of Goodfellas shot. But a wide angle lens, and understanding that it's going to give you a wide perspective that goes beyond the way we see, you know? So it's going to really give you a sense of presence in the scene, but also it can distort. So if it's a horror type thing, maybe you want to distort with a wide angle lens. Maybe you want somebody to be closer and have their features pulled out a little bit.
Tessa, I'm taking notes. Okay, so we like the wide angle. You're describing exactly what I need. But that's a conversation that I feel like, yeah, like you said, that's research I can do to empower me. But like when you're describing that, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. You know.
Well, I think that's the thing too. Just for directors to learn before they speak to a cinematographer is like you were saying, you don't have to know all the technical stuff by any means, but you do need to have an understanding of the basic terminology of, you know, tilting versus panning and simple stuff like that, as well as, like you said, a basic understanding of not even, you know, how to use the lenses or, you know, f-stops and all that sort of stuff, but just like this lens is going to produce this kind of look, like stuff like that, because otherwise you're probably just going to waste time in your conversations with your cinematographer when they're trying to explain all this to you. So just, you know, it behooves you to at least have a basic understanding of that stuff for sure.
That's why I put that all in the book.
Love that.
And, you know, I have chapters on lenses and I show examples, you know, of what a fisheye looks like versus a wide angle versus a normal versus a telephoto, all of that. And how they're effective in storytelling, because they all have their own storytelling properties, right? If I really want to focus and create a beauty shot, I will use a longer lens like an 85, because the subject will be the only thing that's sharp and in focus. Background will be soft. It's the way it captures a person. It's very complimentary, right? If I want to do the exact opposite, I'll put on a wider angle lens. I'll push that camera in closer and I will distort the features, and everything in the background will be kind of sharp too. And you're not quite sure what you're looking at if everything's in focus, you know?
Right.
So understanding the basic principles of that. And also, it was Matthew Levitique when I spoke to him about working with Spike Lee and Darren Aronofsky and Jon Favreau. Early on, Jon Favreau didn't really understand the full concept he does now of depth of field. And he wanted something very, very tight. And he said, I want the eyeball in focus and the thing behind it. And Maddie said, well, you get one or the other because of depth of field, because I'm pushed in so much, I can't give you that. It's just lens proxemics will not allow me to have both. So pick an eye or an ear.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be at 150 mil at 2.8. We don't have a lot of choice here. Understanding the concept of what depth of field is. I explained it all in the book as well. I've taught it for 1,000 years. I've utilized it myself. I used to run around when I was shooting with my old American cinematographer's manual. I'd check the depth of field charts. I'd have a director who's nervous. Well, if we do this, is it going to be in focus? I'm like, yep, we're good. We're good to go. We sure? Yep, we're good to go. I promise you.
And that's probably helpful for you, like for you as a director to be like, okay, like knowing what you want in focus. Something simple as that is like, the thing you want to highlight, because it could be an object that tells a part, showing, not telling, a part of the story that you want to make sure gets captured, or the person that you're highlighting, Yeah. So that's a really good point.
Because that's part of the storytelling. Everywhere you point the lens, you're telling the audience, look here, this is important. Mm-hmm. So every piece of it is a piece of the puzzle, moving the story forward, right? Yeah. So it can't be random and arbitrary. Shots wouldn't be meandering. They would be really telling you, zoop, here, this is what's important. Look here. Oh, okay, there's a giant teacup in the shot. Why? Oh, because the poison is in it. Oh, I get it.
Right.
Hitchcock did that.
Exactly.
The biggest thing in the scene, at the, here's this big glass of water.
Yeah.
Bergman's passing out in the background. Well, because the poison is in that, right?
Right. The amount of songs and sound effects on Jambox is insane. I can't believe these are almost all exclusive to their database. Plus, you can use the stems to make your own. So many resources.
It's wild and affordable. For the kind of indie films we make, we're probably only ever going to pay between $9.99 and $19.99 a month. That's cheaper than a lot of music we've licensed in the past.
And the composers that created this music work for huge studios and creators. We're talking directors like Scorsese and global brands like DJI. That's huge.
Yup, that's how you know they're good.
And because they love creators, they gave us a discount code to share with our fam. 10% off with code FEMME10.
Aw, how sweet. We love working with companies like Jambox that actually care and know what creators need. Connecting filmmakers with ridiculously good music and sound effects.
So check out jambox.io and remember to use our code FEMME10. That's FEMME10. It's so funny too, because stuff like that is so, to just like the average audience, like movie watcher, it's subliminal, like they don't think about that. But to all of us that are like filmmakers and we actually see all those little details, it's like, of course, there's a reason that we're looking at this cup or whatever, and it's so funny how, your brain changes when you are aware of those things.
Yes. And everything, of course, about creating films is a manipulation. Mm-hmm. Everything. Absolutely everything. So what you're looking at, what you're not looking at, what you're being shown, what's when a huge long shot, all of these are storytelling devices. And so what I think also is one of the early conversations to have when you're developing a script and you're talking to your potential cinematographer about it, they'll say, okay, past theme, what genre are we in here? Know what genre you're in specifically, because that dictates the way it's going to be lit. Mm-hmm. And then when you start to talk about focal length, I see, I want to be able to see, like, or Citizen Kane. I mean, the whole thing is deep focus for a reason. It's part of the story. It's part of the theme. Everything is in focus because he was trying to spend his whole life to fill a void that was taken away at childhood. Mm-hmm. So all these things he bought were part of that, so they're all in focus.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
And then camera angle. Why are we shooting low as opposed to why are we shooting down, right? Mm-hmm. So if you shoot from a lower angle, what you're doing is empowering who you're shooting. You're making them seem bigger, right? So if you're trying to show that somebody is like, dominating somebody else, you're going to shoot a little lower on them. You're going to shoot a little down on who. And when you go back and forth, they seem weak and small in the shot because you're shooting down on them as opposed to shooting up on them and empowering them. Yeah. Showing a ceiling, a low angle shot showing a ceiling is like saying you're so big you fill the room, Yeah. And if you want to be objective, something completely objective, so you're shooting more or less straight on, right? With a normal lens, which is like 50 millimeter. So you're not saying anything either way, that you're being objective in the way you're recording that.
Mm-hmm. So, that's, from what I'm hearing, like, I guess like 3 tips to our listeners on what they could start today to learn from your book and like just be a better partner in this discussion with your DP is like knowing like terminology, like lenses and like shots, the variation of shots, what are like some takeaways, like I guess like that for our listeners
basically
to like be aware of?
After each chapter in the book, I have a whole list of things that are takeaways.
Perfect. Amazing.
Yeah. What a director should know. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah.
And it's all right there because it's a longer list. And, if you're really going to focus on color palette, what a director should know, what a director can do, and now it's like create a shot deck, share visual references, whether it's screen films or whatever, watch this, I like this, watch this, I like this, and get on the same page visually, right? So in terms of understanding lenses, I went through a whole bit what a director could know, and I show examples. It's really spelled out because I have been teaching on and off, for the better part of 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know this shit inside out, and it's like, and I'm right now, you'll appreciate this, I'm a MFA cinematography mentor for a low residency program at Fairleigh Dickinson right here in the Forum campus.
Oh my God. I did Shakespeare at Fairleigh Dickinson. Shakespeare summer camp. Oh my God, that is amazing.
Yeah. So, I'm helping build their program, and, I'm still teaching online in California, but it's more a visual aesthetics class, which is also an important thing to know, is visual aesthetics.
Yeah.
So I'm still doing that and completing a documentary, but it's like, it's still fun to be able to share all this, because what else am I going to do with all this knowledge? Do another book? I don't know. But I have to.
No, that's amazing.
I had one of the best interviews with Ed Lachman at his loft in New York City on a Sunday afternoon pre-COVID, right before. He's in my book. Ed Lachman, who is also from Morristown, who shoots all Todd Haynes films.
Oh my God.
You look him up on IMDb, you'll be like mind blown of what he's done. So an amazingly intelligent man. That I was just an absolute pleasure to talk to and talk with, and the fact that we had no problem understanding each other. Everything. It was great. It was so great. And he said, well, anytime you want me to come to campus, just let me know.
Oh, yeah.
Girl, Fairleigh is going to be very pleased to have you. Yeah. That's it. That's incredible. And I mean, like, mentorship is so important, so I think that's really a beautiful thing that you are giving back with your knowledge. We love that.
Yeah.
You can use that. But yeah, that's amazing.
It's like I've never stopped learning cinematography. It's an ongoing thing. And I've always incorporated studies with as well. I don't think myself as, the PhD type. I'm not that type of person because I am so technical as well. But I love understanding, the history of things, the aesthetics, understanding how to incorporate that and bring it all together, because that's where the best directing comes from. I used to teach directing too, because I taught it from a cinematographer's perspective.
I figured. Yeah, absolutely.
Because what do you
Makes sense.
want from a director day one of shooting? Where do I put the camera? Where do we want the camera? What's the shot?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's a wide shot. Great. And you can go talk to your actors and let me light that for you. You know?
Yeah. No, that's so great. But this is kind of fun to like really get into the nitty gritty of like the shots and the kind of lenses maybe I want to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
And why,
And why? Yeah, because it's a psychological thriller. So I psychologically need to know what is being, captured in those moments to moments.
Just saying that, I just had a whole multitude of images came into my head. Psychological thriller. I know where you're going. You can have darker shadows, moody lighting. Your color palette can have like bluish hues. It could be kind of creepy.
Yes.
Lens.
Yes. Our night today, right now, I imagine it very different because the day kind of is like very colorless almost.
It's like hazy.
It's very like hazy and neutral palettes. What's the word I'm looking for when it's the same color but different shades? Like desaturated, exactly. Monochromatic. Like, because the clothing is kind of but then at the night and in the dream sequences, we get a contrasting blue to purple reds kind of thing happening.
Yep.
And it's like, that's where like, the horrors come out more so in that. Yeah.
And
So I'm very excited. I love it.
with that too, you can think about how movement will help tell the story. You know, there's so many types of devices that are so easy to work with now. You know, a little gimbal, a Ronin S, something where you can just sort of float, where you don't need a steady cam because that'll do it for you. And it could be floaty shots. You know, somebody could be sitting there, but if it's a psychological thing, the camera could be going around them. You know, there's so many moving type shots that can add to that. You know,
have you seen Fresh on HBO yet?
no.
Okay. It is a thriller.
Sounds
It's
like a
amazing.
reference.
It's shot by Pavel Pawlowski. I'm going to say his name wrong. He also DP'd Hereditary, another horror film I love.
Okay.
And it's no shocker that I loved this film so much and the way it was shot. But that one, I was really analyzing, and I'm going to watch again for the movement of it. I thought it was really like fluid and like kind of gave that's like, I love movement in film, and the way it was done was like creepy and perfect. So,
and just an edit, it's on Hulu, not HBO.
Okay.
Thank you. Hulu. Sorry, Hulu. Forgive me. Yeah. And it was a female director's first debut. So, you know, support, shout out. But it was, and like, also something else that I want to use the device, and it was also done in this film, which I'm excited to kind of relay. This is an example I want to go share with my DP, for example, is like the use of mirrors, like they were shown everywhere. I envision that in my film too, as a reflection to my character and how she is feeling about herself in different situations, and then how it's reflected outward. So I saw like a use of that, and it's trippy, but there's a reason why. You just feel like, oh, okay, like what's being reflected here,
Right?
That kind of stuff.
So that's perfect. I mean, if you have visual references that you can share with your DP, then they're just going to translate. I get it. Okay. Then they'll figure out, how did you get that moving shot? Oh, you use a gimbal. What kind of gimbal? Oh, that's a jib shot. And they just will figure it out. I mean, really, just give them a direction to go in, and they will go there. Because it's like, oh, okay. People did that to me early on. It's like, I wanted to look like this. Like, oh, okay. Look like that.
Yeah. The possibilities are endless.
Just snap of a finger. Yeah, I got you.
As long as we get where you want, we can deliver it. You know what I mean? If we don't understand, then we're just throwing things at you. Well, you want this? It's like throwing eggs at a wall. You know, what's going to stick? What do you want? If you say, I want this, oh, okay, I can give you that. You know, it's really not a problem.
No, that's so helpful to hear. Like, you know, like find, you know, go watch films. Like I don't want it like my vision to be like, you know, like just kind of an imprinted version of something else exactly. But I feel like I've done the development of my story so much that when I see something like that, I think it's fair enough to be like, yeah, I want that. Like it's there. What? And now let's tell it in my story.
Well,
if that makes
all these
sense.
different references, and then you can go to Shot Deck and look at images that, you know, for color palette or type of angles or things like that, and just kind of put something together. It just helps so much. And in terms of, if you don't have a DP yet, but you're looking to acquire DP, sit down with people, look at their reels, but also just get a sense intuitively of how you feel like you could work with them. Like, you want to have a connection with somebody. If somebody is irritating you from the first 10 minutes, that's not somebody you want to be on set with for 12 hours.
Right. Especially in such a close relationship too.
Yes. You want somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like, you know, that's your right-hand person. That's somebody you look to when you do kind of derail a little bit. Well, what do you think? Should we do that again, or should we go wider? DP's right there looking and going, yeah, let's do it again a little tighter this time. Okay, good to go.
Yeah.
That is really helpful. Yeah. And I think we encourage everyone who is on that journey to do that. Yeah, absolutely. I say that with everybody that you want to put in your trench and go to war with. Like, you want, like, I would say that, like, everyone sit down, talk to them, make sure they're like that kind of compatibility. But I think with the DP, like, they're legit, like, your right hand person.
Yeah.
Like that relationship needs to be a marriage of all sorts.
Never feel intimidated or bullied by your DP ever. Never. You should feel comfortable, and that they trust. You trust. There's a mutual trust there, a bond. So you shouldn't feel like, oh my God, I'm afraid to talk to my DP. There used to be stories of that in the day where, the DP was the scary person behind the camera that you don't want to piss off,
Yeah.
But it's not like that. It should never be.
It should not be like that. No, I'm glad you bring that up. Absolutely not. I couldn't imagine doing a film with someone that I like that. I'd be like, no.
It makes you feel dumb. It was like, they help you. They're helping you to pull the vision out of your head.
Yeah.
It's like, tell me what you want. Okay, something like this. And that's where the references come in,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to promote, but I do think that the book, I tried to put in everything I've been teaching all these years in there so that it's right there written and you can go to page 232 or whatever and go, that's what I got to do. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. I love that.
No,
and especially that you, like you said, you list out things, like you're very specific of all of that. So it's not only a good book to like read and digest the first time, but it's a good reference book to have as well, it sounds like.
It is. And this new edition that I did, when you do a second edition, lots of times you don't do a lot of difference. I gutted it.
Yeah.
I mean, basically rewrote the book. It should have another title.
Well, because things have changed and so much over the years with like we were just talking about in the beginning of this episode with the technology. So that totally makes sense. And that how cool, because you still are using everything you've learned over the years and now even more so with like the new adaptation of tech and all of that. So that's I mean, for our listeners who didn't read like your first edition, it's like awesome to know that it's not just this tweaked version. It is literally so relevant to today.
There's new interviews that are with cinematographers that I talked to afterwards because I kept, like I said, collecting those interviews.
Yeah.
More women cinematographers in there. I've got at least 6 or 7 different cinematographers who I quote throughout each chapter that they're talking about their experiences with things, they like to work with a director, and I talked to Rodrigo Prieto. What a wonderful cinematographer. He works with Martin Scorsese now. I spoke with him several times, and he is one charming person, I'll tell you, but also a genius of cinematography. I mean, and so willing to share.
Yeah.
Maddie
and those interviews are included in the book, you were saying?
Clip excerpts.
And that's so beautiful because you're taking these raw conversations you're having that most people don't get to sit down and chat with these wonderful talented
the conversations were so good. That's why I did the full interview books. So that one is conversations with contemporary cinematographers, the eye behind the lens. Then I have the full interviews with everybody I talk to. Pictures, many pictures and examples, storyboard, shot lists, all the things that you
can you hold up? Maybe I'll cut this part for like a reel or something. Can you show up an example of the photo examples, like page of like the lenses?
Let's see. Oh, of the lenses?
Yeah.
Because I have a whole color section here with
or color, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like that's perfect. So you get the framing shot and
yes, this is all about color palette.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Varieties of color palettes.
Love it.
Yes.
And so of course it was also fun to go through, all these films for frame grabs of things. And then I pulled from lots of times from quotes where a DP I interviewed was talking about a certain film and what they did to create that look or why they created that look or whatever. And then I do have a whole section about art and visual references because that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. So I have Rembrandts in here.
Awesome.
That I love, but they also have
from the paintings,
doing a horror film. You could do this.
Right, with the light, like studying like how the light and the dark shadows work and contrasting. Yeah.
Because when I teach lighting, it's about, okay, what, where is the light coming from, right?
Yeah.
Is it a motivated source light or is it an unmotivated source light? If it's motivated, it's coming from a window, it's coming from a lamp, it's coming from fire, whatever, right?
Yeah.
If it's unmotivated because it's sci-fi or something else, it could be coming from a floor, it could be so many things. But a single source light creates a lot of shadow, and the only way you fill in that shadow is with an additional light, fill light, right? So chiaroscuro is a style of Italian painting that is very, very high contrast, very dramatic. So a Rembrandt, a Caravaggio, all of those are chiaroscuro. And so they have a lot of contrast, which is a great reference for dramas, for psychological thrillers, for things like that. And they're beautiful paintings because they tell a story in and of themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So that's an early reference of, you could go to still photography, you could go to paintings, books of paintings. When they did Road to Perdition, Sam Mendes, who was a theater director, he went to Edward Hopper paintings for a visual reference to share with Conrad Hall.
Yeah.
And so many references like that are discussed throughout,
Yeah.
that are truly used,
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing to be able to do that. Yeah.
So
And
my background helped me understand a lot of that,
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, I don't want to give too much away to our listeners. I want them to read the book. So on that note, to wrap up, where can our listeners find you? And, since you have several books, I'm assuming you have a website, something like that, social media, anything like that you would like to share.
I need to work on that. Right now, this, of course, is on the Michael Wiese website.
Okay, perfect.
MWP.com. Amazon carries a book as well. But I do have to create if I ever get my shit together, really, I have to create a website and a whole thing where people can ask me questions and I would love to do that. I just haven't had the time to, pull that together.
Well, keep us posted because we will absolutely share with our audience when you are ready and launched. Like, yeah, absolutely.
That's on my to-do list. And the book, I can just quickly share with you the people I talked with for the interview book is Maurice Alberti, John Bailey, Robert Ellsworth, Kirsten Johnson, who's a documentary filmmaker, recently in the ASC, Kira Kelly, recently in the ASC, Ellen Kouras, Edward Lachman, Matthew Levitique, John Lindley just won Lifetime, he won the President's Award, the ASC, Seamus McGarvey, Reed Morano, who's also directing, Polly Morgan, Rachel Morrison, who's also directing, Rodrigo Prieto, Cynthia Pushek, shot a lot of beautiful television. Harris Savides passed away, but I got one of his last interviews. Nancy Schreiber, who just is shooting endlessly. John Seal, Australian cinematographer I love from the 80s and 90s. Sandy Sissel, Dante Spinotti, Salvatore Totino, Amy Vincent, and Mandy Walker.
That's amazing. That's so many people. That's so exciting.
That is so exciting. And what a treasure for you to share with everyone.
Yeah.
So. I went to Rutledge, so Focal Press.
Amazing.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes of where to find these books and, all of these these gems. But thank you so much for coming on today and speaking about it. And we've learned a little bit more about communication and how to better, empower ourselves as directors speaking to DPs. So I really feel like our audience will benefit from that today too as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to FemmeRegard Podcast. If you like what you hear, tune in every Friday for more tips on the filmmaking business and insightful conversations with industry professionals. We can only grow with your support, so please subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can also join the Fam on Patreon. For more on us, check us out at FemmeRegard.com.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.